Imagine a world ruled by kings, where your voice means nothing, your freedom is limited, and your destiny is decided by a distant crown. Now picture a handful of colonies, scattered, outgunned, and outnumbered, daring to challenge the greatest empire on earth. This isn't just the story of America's independence. It's the story of ordinary people who sparked a revolution that changed the world forever. This is how a nation was born. The seeds of rebellion, why the colonists rose up. To truly understand why the American Revolution happened, we need to go back, decades before a single shot was fired. The 13 colonies weren't always rebellious. In fact, for years, most colonists proudly called themselves British. They spoke the language, traded under British laws, and sent their sons to fight in Britain's wars. But everything changed after one event, the 7 Years' War. Britain had just won a massive global conflict against France, but victory came at a cost. The British Empire was drowning in debt. And guess who they expected to help pay for it? The colonies. New taxes came pouring in, the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts. These weren't just economic burdens, they were insults. Why? Because the colonists had no say in them. No votes. No voice in Parliament. The rallying cry began to spread like wildfire, no taxation without representation. What started as frustration soon turned into resistance. Boycotts, protests, and secret gatherings took place across the colonies. Groups like the Sons of Liberty began to rise. What once felt like loyal subjects were slowly turning into revolutionaries. Sparks in Boston, when protest turned to fire Boston. A city that would become the beating heart of rebellion. By the early 1770s, British troops were stationed across the colonies, especially in Boston, to keep the peace. But to the colonists, it felt like occupation. The air was thick with anger. And then, on a cold night in March 1770, it happened. British soldiers opened fire on a crowd of unarmed colonists. 5 Americans were killed. The event was quickly named the Boston Massacre. Newspapers exploded with emotion. And though the facts were debated, the message was clear: blood had been spilled. Tensions rose, but the fire hadn't fully caught yet. That came in 1773. Parliament passed the Tea Act, giving a British company a monopoly on tea and undercutting colonial merchants. The colonists were furious, not just about the tea, but the principle. So, on December 16, 1773, something unthinkable happened. A group of colonists, disguised as Mohawk warriors, boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. This was the Boston Tea Party. Not just an act of protest, but a declaration. The colonies were done being pushed around. The British saw it as open defiance. Punishments followed quickly, harsh laws called the Intolerable Acts. But instead of weakening the colonies, they united them. The shot heard round the world. War begins at Lexington and Concord. By 1775, the colonies were a ticking time bomb. British General Thomas Gage had one mission: disarm the colonists before they got dangerous. He sent 700 British troops from Boston to seize weapons hidden in Concord, Massachusetts. But this wasn't a secret. Colonial spies and midnight riders had already spread the alarm. And one rider became a legend, Paul Revere. His cry echoed through the night: "The British are coming." At dawn, On April 19, 1775, British troops met a small group of colonial militia on the Green in Lexington. Someone, no one knows who, fired the first shot. That single bullet would change the world forever. The shot heard round the world. 8 colonists died. But the British weren't done. They marched to Concord, only to find the weapons moved, and hundreds of armed colonists waiting. What followed was chaos. Gunfire erupted, and the British were forced into a brutal retreat back to Boston, ambushed the entire way by colonial militias. What started as a weapons raid turned into a full-scale battle. The war had officially begun. There was no turning back now. The colonies were no longer protesting, they were fighting. A nation assembles, the Continental Congress, and the road to independence. The battles at Lexington and Concord were more than military skirmishes, they were a wake-up call. Across the colonies, leaders realized this wasn't just Boston's fight anymore. This was everyone's fight. And so, in May 1775, delegates from all 13 colonies gathered in Philadelphia. Their mission? Decide the fate of a continent. This historic meeting became known as the Second Continental Congress. These men didn't agree on everything. Some still hoped for peace with Britain. Others, like John Adams and Patrick Henry, believed independence was the only way forward. But one decision was clear: they needed an army. And fast. They appointed a tall, quiet Virginian to lead it, George Washington. A man who didn't seek power, but commanded respect. His job: unite farmers, blacksmiths, and volunteers into an army that could take on the strongest military in the world. Meanwhile, the British Crown offered no peace. King George III declared the colonies in open rebellion. Diplomacy was dead. There would be no going back. And slowly, a bold idea began to spread, something unheard of at the time: total independence. No more British rule. No more royal chains. The colonies were ready to become a nation. For the first time in history, a people not only dreamed of freedom, they planned to fight for it. The Declaration of Independence, words that changed the world. It's July 1776. The air in Philadelphia is thick with heat and history. Inside Independence Hall, the debate is over. The colonies have reached the point of no return. The dream of freedom must now be written into history. The task falls to a 33-year-old Virginian, Thomas Jefferson. Over days and nights, he pens the words that would echo through time: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. It wasn't just a declaration against King George, it was a declaration for humanity. For liberty? For the radical belief that government should serve the people, not rule them. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. The United States of America was born, not with land, money, or power, but with an idea. A bold, dangerous, world-shaking idea. But declaring freedom was just the beginning. Britain didn't step aside. It responded with force. The war would rage for 7 more years. But that single document, the Declaration, turned the American Revolution from a rebellion into a revolution of principles. What began as a protest over taxes became a movement that redefined freedom. 13 colonies stood up to an empire, and gave birth to a nation. Not just for Americans, but for dreamers around the world. This was the American Revolution. This was the birth of a nation. If this story moved you, if the courage of these revolutionaries inspired you, then don't let it end here. Smash that like button to support our channel, and subscribe for more epic journeys through history and science. Drop a comment below. What part of the American Revolution do you think changed history the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you believe in the power of history to awaken minds, share this video with a friend. Because the past isn't just behind us. It's the blueprint of everything we are today. This is Decoding History and Science. Until next time. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep the revolution alive.